Hello, a video today about money, but more about the games that money is played in. Now, when I say games, I very much like you to think about the games that I'm going to try and explain to you, just like sports games, and how they might have been invented in the beginning in one way, but as the game developed, the rules changed to make them better, clearer, better, to make it a game to play in or a game to be a spectator sport or whatever. The rules change. Okay. Now, for this idea that money is a promise to do labour, it works well enough. But more than that, I'd like you to think about these. I'm going to talk about 5 different games, and we can say that it's all played with, I don't know, a round bouncy ball, and that round bouncy ball is money. Now, I'll just give you one or two and see how we develop. Okay, the first game that's played that has rules that are basically understood by the participants is the household game, you and I. We are born, we are educated, we then go out into the real world to earn these round bouncy ball money tokens. These money tokens we can exchange for survival. We can buy shelter, warmth, food and luxuries, etc. And that is the way it is. We know that we're generally taken care of in the OECD world if we can't do this, getting enough tokens together, but we can say that there is a serious thing that we have to go out into the world and earn these money tokens. And to survive, really to survive, it's more serious in other parts of the world, but you need these money tokens to actually live. Some people die if they don't have enough of them. Okay. Now, the household game is played whereby we can live hand to mouth or paycheck to paycheck, renting, buying food, buying clothing, etc., and surviving that way. And if one time that we don't have the money, then we have to give up something. We either have to go cold or hungry or whatever. There's another way you can play the game, that you can get a mortgage to get your shelter, and you promise then to labour for 25 years to pay the bank back for the money that you've been given at a certain point. So that Chris Martenson designation of money as a promise to labour works very well. I probably won't refer to that again. But we know that if we are playing the game well and can get ahead of the game, we can do a thing called saving. We can save these money tokens by being ahead of the game. Or we're in debt, and what else would we call it? Just being in debt is basically losing the game, but we know in the modern world that you can play the game quite well by losing it, by being in debt. But the game basically is, at the end of the day, to be ahead of the game, to have paid your debts back, to have lived a life where you've kept warm and eaten all that's necessary, and maybe at the end had some savings left over, I don't know, to give to your children, grandchildren, for inheritance, whatever it is. That is basically the household game. Right, the business game, as I've said in the past, can go over multiple generations. It can go on for hundreds of years. Is we could say the same. We can compare quite easily inputs and outputs. It's slightly different in business that commodities are coming in and being worked and going out, but we can think of the inputs and outputs. But most important, the thing at the end of the day is the business has to make a profit. And if the business makes a profit, it's winning the game. Because if it consistently loses the game and makes losses and the complications of the bank lending it money to cover losses for 5 years, maybe 10 years on some occasions. But generally, if you make losses, you lose the game in the game called business. So you've got losses and you've got gains, profits in that game, all using the same round bouncy ball money tokens. Okay. Governments have their own way of playing the game, that the rules were set out and changed and developed and in time, whereby they spend out money. Now, I'm not going to go into MMT or anything like that, not for this, keeping it easy. The government spends out money on civil servants to do things, and to have that money, it has to balance that money with taxes or excise duty on imports or whatever it might be. It must get enough money in to pay for the amount of money going out. That's kind of the way that the government game's to be played. And the government can be in surplus or it can be in deficit. And if it's in deficit, it can do deficit borrowing by borrowing from banks, from private people, from other countries, whatever it might be, to make up that difference that it can't do in taxes. But we really quite clearly know the game is to run what we'd call a balanced budget, but we don't really, it's a bit like the household one and the business one, we don't really know if you can win the game by playing in deficit. We don't know, because there's nobody that comes along and blows a whistle and says that's the end of the game, you're the winner and you're the loser. All we know is that those are basically the outside parameters for the rules of the game that is played by government. Now, banks have their own rules that they play. The banking rules obviously are very complicated and different, but I'll just do one sort of aspect of it, is the lending to households for things like mortgages. That's what an awful lot of banking money goes out for. So it's important. So that's the main thing. What the bank has to do, or to play the game properly, is to run the bank in a certain way that it can lend me money for 25 years and it can hold on to the ticket that I say that I'll pay it back with my labour, and I've got the money then. I've got the money and the bank has the promise for me to pay for 25 years. Now, it does, because it runs through a long time in history, it should have enough of those in the past to keep it going, to do it for the ones in the present. And that obviously runs on into the future. In other words, the bank should be able to run itself by holding on to my ticket for 25 years and I pay it back the money that I'd eventually, 25 years' time, I pay it back for the last payment of my mortgage. But the bank has run itself for those 25 years on the dribbles of my money coming in and everybody's in the past. Now, if the bank can do that, it's solvent, it's liquid, but at the moment we know that the banks have lost the game. They can't play that game anymore. And so many other complications that they don't play the game in that certain way due to securitization. But we're not going into complication, we're just going to the outside parameters for games. So what's happened now is the banks have said, well, we can't actually hold on for 25 years for this money to dribble in from him. They have given that promise to pay to the central bank, who's now holding it, and the bank has been given the money straight off. It does not now have to wait for the 25 years, it's got it now. And you could say, well, it's lost the game. But by doing it, the central bank, who's better capable of waiting for the 25 years, has made the bank now again solvent and liquid. Well, it might not be solvent, but we're not going into complications. But we could say the bank's lost the game. But the central bank has come in and made it so it's not lost the game, because it's now got, it doesn't have to wait the 25 years. It's got my money that it's lent out now, so it can keep going and playing the game. But you can see it's all played with a round bouncy ball. That's just giving you the idea to link into sports, that a round bouncy ball is so versatile to play so many different games with. That's what money is played with, as a token to see whether these people in these particular games are winning their game or losing their game. But nobody blows the whistle, nobody comes along and says winner, loser. It just keeps going. Okay, that's banks. We've got world trade is the fifth and final one. Now, there was a time where there was a gold standard which was a very strict way of playing the game. If you were imported too much and didn't export enough, your gold went out, and when you came to the end of your gold, that was the end of you. It was kind of like somebody blowing a whistle and you were out. But it just actually meant that other things happened in different aspects of the different games that were being played. But it was a very serious parameter there, a rule of the game. But that rule doesn't apply anymore. So what we have is countries like the United States using these money tokens to give to China for real solid work and goods that the Chinese people have done, and they get the real goods over in the United States for these tokens, and China then sends the tokens back to the United States to keep that game going. Now, most all of these games, that's 5 now, are all played with the same money token, so it's asking an awful lot of that money token to work in all of these games, or it's asking a lot of these games to be different enough that they can play different games with the same money token. But we can certainly say that if we go back 50 years and got the players of the games to look at the way the rules are being applied or not applied and the way the games are being played now, they'd be aghast at the way the games are being played, and they would blow whistles all over the place and say, no, it's all out of order, it's a complete mess. You're just not playing any of these games really to any particular rules anymore. You're just altering the rules just to keep the game going, and that is what's going on, obviously. But when it comes to answering questions like what is money, what is this round bouncy ball, it always depends about which game that you're talking about. There are probably more games, but those are just 5. But it depends. You can give a different answer for household, for governments, for banks, for trade, and for business. It's different what money is. I mean, in the last one, it was you run trade deficits, trade surpluses, banks are illiquid, businesses make profits or loss, governments run in deficit or surplus, and we have savings or we have debts. All different, all played with the same thing. So when the question's asked, it all depends on what game that you're talking about. And I think I'll stop there because anything else would be confusing. But it's just putting over that point that these different games with these different rules that are being stretched and adapted and altered as circumstances arise are being played. But they were never, we're certainly not playing to any old rules. They're certainly changed completely from how they used to be. And nobody really knows in any of them why they're being played that way. Right back to the opening question. I leave education and go into the real world, and I have to earn these money tokens. Why? Why do I have to earn these money tokens? Now, before you do a comment, if you do a comment, let it sink in and roll round the head a bit. Why do I have to go out and buy earn money tokens? You got it? Why do I have to do it? And when the answer comes up, attack it a bit. Why do I have to earn these money tokens? That's it. Leave it with you. Look forward to the comments. Bye.